That's even better.
That's right. These works made this whole password. We will remember this forever. I like happy endings.
Happy endings, eh? Okay. All right. We, yesterday, sorry, we completed reading, at least, the we completed reading the Cosmic Fire and the Initiation Human and Solar entry on the path of the Planetary Logoi. Now let's see what the Rays and the Initiations has to say about this. We did see together that this third path is a very beautiful one and has a whole range of color and sound aspects to it, as well as the overcoming of duality and an emphasis upon psyche. These planetary logoi are the true divine psychologists. They, the study of psychology leads to the third path. But as DK says, it's a psychology the likes of which most of us know very little. But then it did strike me that, you know, this book we're studying is a treatise on psychology. It is the psychological key to the secret doctrine, says Master DK, so I guess it's fairly clear that he is a divine psychologist. He's so many things. Quite extraordinary, the comprehensiveness of the scope of his thought, and also the detail into which he is capable of entering very rationally. In other words, such a good example of what we call pure reason. So we're being taught by a master who seems to be an expert in this Buddhic area of pure reason. Anyway, reading this and then hopefully going on to a discussion of the path to Sirius. Okay. It is obviously, I like the way he begins, it's obviously impossible to say much about this path. Well, okay. He manages 4 pages worth, and he did give us quite a bit. I just have to keep reading and rereading that because the astronomical implications, the involvement of Sagittarius and the Mahachohan school and Betelgeuse and possibly Orion, it's just filled with deep occult hints. I haven't sorted that all out yet. I know there's some who feel they have sorted that out, but I always manage to find exceptions. Martha, did you bring the Pharaoh? Your treatise. You found it? You have it? Just find that bit about the headdress. That's all I want to know. Somewhere is a picture of the pharaohs, the pharaohesses. Yeah, and that's why, you know, here's, be careful there. If you have Vulcan so close to everything, you have to be careful what you hit. Thank you, Martha. Yes, this is the picture, and now we will look at something which is really amazing. People who are interested in Egyptology have probably noticed that both Isis and Osiris, the pharaoh, carried strange crowns in their head. If we look closer at Isis's Nefertiti with her beautiful head cover, we will see that the drawing on her crown is Orion. Nefertiti, was she the wife of Akhenaten, who is said to be an earlier incarnation of Kutumi? Nefertiti. If we look, we see Orion on her crown. And on his crown we will see the great bear. When the pharaoh participated in great ceremonies, these two crowns were worn together. And they make up the well-known drawing we see everywhere on walls, stone walls, rocks, etc., hieroglyphics. This is equal to the positive pole and the minus pole, light and darkness, pleasure and pain, and so forth. The myth tells us that Isis and Osiris were eternal lovers as well as sister and brother. They lived a happy life. And then we go on to the death of Osiris. So our question here is, I'll have to read this more, Martha. Maybe I can get these few pages photocopied. Well, I don't need to take the book. I can just take a few, this part of it. Because these were in the headquarters of the university, and Marianne sold the house, and I'm just not sure where it is right now. But thank you for bringing this in. And the question that remains, are these the great pairs of opposites? The Great Bear, in a way, and Orion. Do they represent the positive and negative pole? Do they represent head and heart? Do they represent first ray and second ray? Because, in a way, the first ray line and the second ray line are the great pairs of opposites. And, or will we assign the sixth ray to Orion because it is so closely connected, let us say, with Sagittarius, and because the path of the Planetary Logoi, which goes to Betelgeuse Orion, apparently, is largely a third-rate path. On the other, yeah, I mean, it's undertaken in the Mahachohan's department. This actually, you know, it seems like, well, why in the world would we really need to know this? But what it would do is it would help us look at the one about whom naught may be said, or the local supercosmic logos, and it would help us figure out which constellations are his chakras. I mean, we know that Draco is a kind of a base of the spine that has risen into the head, and we know that the Great Bear is involved with his head centers, and we know that the zodiac is involved with the heart in the head. We suspect the Pleiades are there, and it's just sort of looking at the larger God in whom we are living and moving and having our being, and trying to be certain of these sources. And that can be very meaningful when it comes to the invocation and alignment of energies. So it's a very big question, and we have to look more deeply. Martha, if we had, who knows after all these years, but if we had the source from which these ideas were taken, we might be able to trace it further. Of course, now we have the internet, and in those days maybe we didn't have it to such an extent. So it might be easier to find than we think. Yeah, if we could find the ray of Orion by this afternoon, we'd be doing well. Right. This is Martha's destiny, to find the ray of Orion today. We do know that it has 7 subrays, And those 7 first magnitude stars will each represent one of the rays. It's the perfect, what can I say? It's the perfect rectangle with the Trinity within it. You know, it's symbolically so important. It's like a larger version of Gemini in a way. You know, Gemini is the oblong square. Now, Orion's not exactly a square. An oblong square is a rectangle, and the rectangle is the ray 2 figure among these quadrangles. Because, as I say, it's the generator of all proportion and leads to all of the musical ratios. So, you know, if we discover Orion to be in a way an oblong square, that in itself is a great hint towards its potential second ray nature. We do want to know, you know, what is the heart of the great Logos, the one about whom naught may be said. Now, some have said, and they're very brilliant people, that it's simply our solar system that is the heart of this supercosmic deity. It's never sat well with me, maybe just because I'm stupid or just, you know, obtuse or something, but it's always seemed out of proportion. It's always seemed like our tiny little solar system and his group is just insignificant when you start considering the Great Bear and the, you know, I thought to myself, I tried to just use numerical proportions, and I said, well, if Orion's the solar plexus, okay, and if our sun is the heart of the super being, okay, but it simply means that the solar plexus is more than 1,000,000 times brighter than the heart. And I thought to myself, well, wait a second, this just doesn't add up. Do you know of any being in which the solar plexus is 1,000,000 times more luminous than the heart? And it doesn't even stop at 1,000,000. When you start looking at those stars in Orion and how some of them are like 300 or 400 or 500,000 times more luminous than our sun, then you stick the sun as the heart center. Maybe I'm being too literal, you know, and I'm looking at exterior illumination rather than interior illumination. But I've never seen the case where the vehicle itself would be so deceptive of the interior illumination. In other words, if the heart is really 1,000,000 times brighter than it appears to be, something's wrong, you know. Even the human being, you can tell of an advanced soul behind a form. Something just shows it. The form shows it. You don't see the perfect master walking around in a form which is totally primitive, you know. So anyway, that's my reasoning on this subject, and it may take the group mind to solve it. We've got some very good esoteric astrologers working in the Moria Federation, and maybe they can put their cosmology and their astrology together, and we can, and you know, and then Martha will provide us with the ray of Orion, okay, and then we will somehow come up with a solution to the cosmological mystery, okay. So I'm going to, on faith, press the red arrow. Okay. Actually, you know, webinarians, we are in a cancer clinic here, which is pretty much like a hospital, and we are demonstrating that we are in a hospital here, I think. You hear occasionally the random sound of coughing ricocheting around the room, you know. It's kind of happening. Okay, it is now, I believe we started with him saying it's obviously impossible to say much about this path. Okay. Those masters, okay, just very quickly here. Those masters who tread it find their way to the various schools for the training of planetary logoi, which are found within certain of the major schemes. I think we read this before, but let's go with it, you know. as stated in Initiation Human and Solar, right? Because she's repeating what was found there in Initiation Human and Solar. They are necessarily few in number, and a small group of them remains to study. Notice that one's studies don't just end. We continue with the schools all the way up. Remain to study in our particular planetary enterprise under Sanat Kumara the highest example of the teaching ray on our planet. Must be a pretty good thing to have Sanat Kumara as a teacher. This they do after making their decision and passing through the door on the periphery of our planetary ring pasnat. We have to break through the etheric barriers of our solar system and onto minimally the cosmic astral plane once we actually are liberated to go further. Then out of incarnation and working through the medium of the higher telepathy, they receive instruction of a nature incomprehensible to us from the members of the council chamber at Shamballa, and primarily from two of the Buddhas of activity. Now, each Buddha of activity represents one ray, and I don't think we can tell for certain which of the two rays is represented here. But it is a third ray path, and so maybe that is significant in some sense. But the third ray Buddhas seem to have more to do with the animal kingdom in some ways, and maybe the first and second ray Buddhas with humanity. Speaking of the council chamber of Shamballa, let us for a moment take a look at who's a member of the council chamber, because this in itself is illuminating. Okay, now we're talking about one who has entered a state of isolated unity. He's become universal in his attitude and perhaps entered the council chamber, but now it talks about who's already a member of this council chamber, and this is interesting. Few of the great lives who formed the inner group of the council chamber, so obviously there must be also an outer group of the council chamber at Shamballa, are of greater advancement than he, the one who's newly entering. The supernal three, the radiant seven, the lives embodying the 49 fires, the Buddhas of activity, and certain eternal spirits from such centers as of dynamic spiritual life as Sirius, or from the constellation which at any one time forms a triangle with our sun and Sirius. There's a astrological hint. And a representative from Venus are of greater, far greater advancement than he is. Well, maybe we don't know what all of these categories actually mean, but I suspect that the supernal three are the esoteric Kumaras, the three esoteric Kumaras, that the radiant seven are the seven ray lords who live in Shamballa, that the lives embodying the 49 fires are probably the sons of Fohat, 49 sons of Fohat. The Buddhas of activity are the three exoteric Kumaras. And of course, Sanat Kumara is both the fourth and the first Kumara. And then these eternal spirits from Sirius or from Venus. Now look, it seems to say that there is a constellation, that there are alternating constellations that form triangles between our sun and Sirius. Like there's always a relationship between our sun and Sirius, but there's a rotation of other constellations, probably zodiacal constellations, who fill the third place, maybe at different times and seasons. This could be an important cycle. Otherwise, he says, all initiates of the 6th degree are there too, and a few of the masters who have undergone specialized training, because they are upon the first ray of will and power, the ray conditioning Shamballa itself, form part of the Great Council. So, you know, DK has now given us then a pretty clear idea of the nature of some of the lives who are in the council chamber. And when we talk about the inner council chamber, I think we had better speak of the logoic plane on a high level. The monads of humanity are found on the 2nd level. But I believe that the liberated monads are found on the logoic plane. As a matter of fact, the Christ himself seems to live at this time on the logoic plane as a 7th degree initiate, sitting at the quote-unquote right hand of God. You know, the old biblical phrases that meant something mystical to people, but nothing exact, and they can have a very occult meaning. So I think that when we look at the different subplanes up here on the logoic plane, if we knew how to do it, we could place the different orders of lives that are found in Shamballa. And when I say a liberated monad, this means a monad who has minimally taken the 6th initiation. No, not 6th, 7th. 7th initiation. Meaning that he has broken his monadic body, and therefore, as a spark, an essential spark of divinity, has been liberated into the sea of fire, which is the nature of the higher plane, where the innermost part of Shamballa can be found. So, you know, the radiant, unbelievable life on those high levels is a great fact of the cosmic physical plane, and it will be, for most of us, thousands of years, if we work at it, before that becomes some kind of impressive reality. But it's good to know these things exist if we believe Master DK. Now, you know, I'm amazed at some people's reactions. They read the opening part of this extract from a letter, from an extract from a letter by the Tibetan minister, and basically they interpret it as if Master DK is saying, "Don't believe what I say." In other words, you know better than I, and if you don't believe what I say, then don't believe what I say. You know, and it's just a total swing over to the other side. So what DK is saying, look, finally use your own intuition, and if there is conformity to it, if what I say conforms to your intuition, then Believe with all your consciousness. But he doesn't say, don't give me the benefit of the doubt. Don't at least act as if I might have something to teach you, and don't test out what I say as if it might be true. So there comes a point, I think, at which you begin to trust a teacher because so much of what they've said bears out in life. It just makes sense. It's logical. It hangs together. That doesn't mean you're a credulous fool, but by that bond of trust between you and the teacher, so much time can be saved. So much progress can be made. But of course, everybody has to reach the point where they know whether or not they really trust. And that, of course, takes some penetration into the teaching. I believe it is advisable to trust Master DK in these matters of spiritual truth. When Blavatsky was writing about him, because he was her teacher when he was in Tibet, even though he was a very young man, relatively. I guess when he was writing with Alice Bailey, by that time he was probably 100 years old or more in terms of the outer vehicle. Who knows? He was probably an arhat even at that time, and did he have the method of preserving a body, and was he still older? But we can be sure that because he was apparently a young man at that time, by the time he was working with AAB, probably 125 by the time he finished in 1949. And Blavatsky described him as a youth so pure that no lie would ever escape his lips. Well, that's saying something, And when it becomes possible to have that kind of relationship with truth as you know it, then the truth as it is appears. Okay. So anyway, these are the members of the council at Shamballa. At least as many as we have been given. Let's see here. It's certainly enough to contemplate. Okay. Having learnt the technique and having passed certain tests, because they're being instructed telepathically by the members of the council chamber of Shamballa, they move into the planetary life of Venus, our Earth's alter ego, and there they complete their training. Well, okay, I may have been incorrect or just spoken partially, but it does look... See, because this is interesting. DK said that Jupiter trains those on the path of the planetary logoi. But now we have Venus too. They move at a certain point after being instructed by the council members and Sanat Kumara himself into the planetary life of Venus. I mean, do they come within the aura? Are they actually transferred? I may be experiencing degraded audio. Okay. Okay, well, maybe. Hopefully not. Where they complete their training as far as our solar system can give it, because more can be given to complete this path than can be given in our solar system. That's the implication. Finding their way eventually onto the cosmic mental plane. Now remember, as I said before, even though the cosmic mental plane, as far as we're concerned, is within the cosmic mental body of our solar logos, and the cosmic astral plane is within the cosmic astral body of our solar logos, both of those planes are above and beyond what we call the solar system, which is an etheric, physical precipitation of the inner nature of the solar logos. So in a way, when you move on to those planes, you are beyond the solar system. You love this word abstruse that you tend to run into in Master DK's teaching. I haven't looked up the exact definition, but I get the idea that it's extremely rarefied, difficult to comprehend thought, that it's very abstracted from normal perceptions, and profound, though so subtle that it is difficult to comprehend. Two things should be borne in mind in connection with this abstruse subject. First, these masters work merely with psyche or the soul aspect within the solar system. Now, from that point of view, the relation of the second ray also makes sense, as well as the fourth ray, not only the third. They are occupied with the subtler expressions of consciousness, with occult impressibility, and that acute sensitivity which produces instant and accurate registration of all soul reactions within any particular planetary life. So they are experts in the art of the communion with the higher soul, experts in soul life. And they are intuitives in a cosmic sense, probably trying to become open to the cosmic Buddhic plane. Is there something there about the word kingdoms? Have I erased something where you're reading? Anybody have Initiations between Human and Solar? Right, raised Initiations. I just want to make sure that there's nothing missing. It's page 406, is it? Is that where we are? Because there's this tendency. No. At least in this version, there's nothing said about kingdoms, and yet it's suddenly brought up. Is it in the book? Okay, so be it. These kingdoms are not necessarily identical with those found on Earth, but they are in all cases vast groups of living forms which are manifestations or expressions of the nature of any particular planetary logos. See, suddenly he's talking about kingdoms out of the blue. And it's the same way in the book as well? Uh-huh. Okay. So are you you have raised and initiations there? And you are on you are on 406, and the word kingdoms, he just begins to talk about kingdoms with no previous sentence. The previous sentence to these kingdoms is, is there anything previous to that where he mentions kingdoms? No. Well, here's why I'm asking. Because kingdoms, the kingdoms of nature, are found throughout the solar system. man, plant, animal, although the forms are different. The kingdoms of nature are throughout the solar system the same, but the forms within those kingdoms can be variable. So I just, it's just unlike him to bring up a subject without preparing it. Anyway. But they are in all cases vast groups of living forms, which are manifestations or expressions of the nature of any particular planetary logos. The masters taking this training are not occupied with individual states of consciousness within any group. It is the consciousness of the whole and its responsiveness to cosmic impacts that engages their attention. So they are turning their attention to the cosmos. They are tuning in extra systemically, meaning beyond our solar system. They are not, if I might so express it, interested in any individual unit of any kind or in its individual reactions, responsiveness, or susceptibility to impression. Although they say, God sees every sparrow fall. DK is trying to train us in this. He says, well, look, I don't care so much about you individually. Oh, what? You're my master. You can't just say that. He says, but as a group member, you are really of moment to me. So the group is always coming first, and he's trying to train his disciples to accept this difficult, impersonal attitude. But apparently it goes even farther than that when we come to those who are training to be planetary logoi. Of course, the amazing thing is the kind of detailed attention that Master DK gave to the lives of each one of his students. He really got into it, He says, I'm only going to talk to you as souls. I'm just going to say it straight and all the rest of it. And then he even was giving advice on diet and exercise to some of them. He was getting right down to the physical life. But he's practical because he knows that if those things are not taken care of, then the higher states will not emerge. There was one lady, I understood from a friend of hers that I talked to that she was bulimic. So she was, and the way DK said about this, he said, sometimes you treat the physical body too harshly and sometimes too well. So this person had a tremendous, I suppose, binge and purge kind of thing before that type of psychological behavior was really understood. And this person, like so many of those disciples, had a Taurus moon. And you know how difficult it can be to change your life when you have a Taurus moon. Anybody have a Taurus moon? All right, well, then we can talk freely about it. Okay. It wouldn't function well if the members were preoccupied with all these other things. So we had to take care of that and help people overcome their resistances. This particular woman dreamt of the exquisite spiritual life. He uses that. He says, you dream of the exquisite sensitivity. And yet, the implication was your physical body is holding you back. So we better attack that particular problem. Nothing is too small, nothing is too great. Master Moria says, the tiniest grain of sand can stop the largest wheel. So He had to give attention to those little things, but all within the context of a larger perspective. Anyway, he said, look, I really care about you as group members. But then he acted in such a way as if he cared about them as individuals too, but it was really so they would become better group members, which would be better for them too. Personality disorders. Yeah, yeah, and who was it? Gene? Oh, yes, yes. Well, that's the one I'm talking about. Not to name names, okay. But like my yeah, well, you think. But then on the other hand, being so close to the light, it tends to draw up whatever's left and make it quite a problem. My friend Keith and I, we joke about the fact that half of them went mad in the end. Lost their minds, went batty. I mean, we're kind of exaggerating, but a life of pressured meditation, working under the eye of the master, it's not easy. So that's the prognosis. Just stick with the teaching. Anyway, so these masters are only concerned with the higher processes of identification. Their work is to further progressive development of identification. And, that's just like the path of earth service. Wise compassion through identification. How many? 12 separate identifications. This is the method. Because in a way, the path of the planetary logoi is similar to that earth path because they're within the system of a particular planetary logos trying to help that logos. They begin with the identification of our monad, of the monad, with our planetary sphere, with the purpose and the will of the Lord of the world. What a place to begin. We can't even touch that. But okay, they begin identifying their monad within our planetary sphere with the purpose and will of Sanakumara, and proceed as their training produces the desired capabilities with greater identifications within the solar system, perhaps with the planet Venus, and with other planetary logoi. Beyond that, we need not proceed. Okay. Please, one more piece of information. I don't care if I can use it. Just tell me. All right. Anyway, their whole training is concerned with the planetary, systemic, and cosmic building of the Antakarana. How very interesting. Because, it's not just our Antakarana. There are Antakaranas connecting planets, and there's Antakaranas which are connecting the solar god to all his planets, and on and on. The ultimate Antakarana leads back to the one and only central point in the universe. The Antakarana is the way out and the way in. Their whole training is the concern with the planetary, systemic, and cosmic building of the Antakarana. For it is via the Antakarana that spirit works, that life processes are controlled, and the will of all developing aspects of deity function. But, well, then what happens before there is an Antakarana? Will spirit not be able to work? Will life processes not be able to be controlled? And will the will of deity not somehow be able to function? What do we have if we don't have an Antakarana? Come on, all you students of threads. What do we have? Remember the threads? Here we go. Let's play the game. Are you ready? Uh-oh. I just disappeared. I just disappeared in me again. Now I'm back, right? This is a whole lesson about the self and the not self. Yes. Good, good. It only took a few letters. Oh, neither did I. It's okay. We have the Sutratma. I knew that. It says like 20/20 vision, right? Hindsight. Yeah, the Sutratma, the life thread, at least the life can present itself, spirit can work, but the will, of course, can function while not being understood. With the Antikarana, it can all be understood. Forget not that relating our planet to the planet Venus is a planetary Antikarana, passing from thence to the heart of the sun and later to the cosmic mental plane. Now, this is one of those, you know, what page are we on? Boy, we're really moving. Excuse me. I just lost. What did I lose here? I want to copy this. Why do I want to copy this? That's a good question, isn't it? Why do I want to copy this? It is because the term heart of the sun is ambiguous. And so I want to get to the bottom of it. Meaning meaning a structure. In other words, I dealt with this a little before. I said the heart of the sun can often mean the subjective soul nature of the solar logos embodied on the cosmic higher mental plane. But we have been seeing that there is some kind of astral rosy sun structure on the cosmic astral plane, to which DK refers as the heart of the sun. Doesn't make any difference. The energy is the same, in a way. It starts from the soul of the solar logos, goes through the astral body, goes through the heart on the monadic plane, the etheric heart on the monadic plane, and then reaches our heart and soul nature, so to speak. But, you know, when you find a good reference, you're a fool to pass it by, because it may be years before you encounter it again, or recognize that you're encountering it. In other words, it's not that you don't necessarily see the same words, but you don't recognize that you're seeing the same words. And, you know, he said about Plato, that Plato, who was second ray and third ray, DK says second ray, but third ray is also there. What was Plato's big gift to humanity in what's called presented attributes? What did he give? And what he gave, well, do you remember that from esoteric psychology too? Like the Buddha gave wisdom. The Christ gave love. And Plato gave did you say logic? Well, okay, let's just say logic was certainly one of the tools needed in the gift. And there, of course, Aristotle was the big one with logic, his syllogistic method. But Plato gave the synthesis of ideas. It's third ray, second ray kind of approach. He looked at the whole world of ideas and he sought to see them all as one whole, and then presented that to humanity. And so when intuitions come upon you as you are reading the books, they are like fireflies, they are like shooting stars. You know, you have to capture them because they may not light up again for years. But if you do capture them, like the firefly in the jar, you know. You have it. And then you can relate it to other things. And before you know it, after a while, the vision of pure reason will present itself. And you will see how everything is related to everything else. And that, of course, is a vision that is a good thing to have. That's what Master DK is teaching us more than anything else, how to relate the many ideas that are found that man can receive. He and Plato are doing something quite similar. Plato by now, of course, is a master. Master DK, you know Søren Hauge. He's a very good teacher here in Denmark, and he has the idea, and I think he's correct. I don't know where he heard it from or whether he thought it up, but that the second in command to Pythagoras in his Crotona Academy was someone called Cleinias, and one of Master DK's earlier incarnations is traced to that man, Cleinias, a philosopher in his own right, a strong philosopher, but who was basically Pythagoras' major assistant, which of course is just how they operate now, isn't it? KH comes first, and then Master DK comes second. Pythagoras came first, Cleinias came second. One of the things that has always troubled me is trying to place Plato and Socrates in this whole hierarchical setup. And I sometimes wonder if there's not a link right back to the Pythagorean Academy. Plato had his academy too. It was 300 years later, right? Plato was living 250 years later than Pythagoras. But they had many, many things in common, including music. They were both experts in understanding music. Anyway, we're talking about this Antikarana passing, what an alignment, from our planet to Venus, to the heart of the sun, to the cosmic mental plane, to Sirius. It's not just a threefold, fourfold alignment. It's a fivefold alignment. So let's put that down. We'll say, probably have done this before, Earth, Venus, heart of sun, cosmic mental plane, Sirius. We know that Sirius rules on the cosmic mental plane, even though the path to Sirius proceeds as far as the cosmic astral plane. There are rainbow bridges. That's another name for the Antikarana, we know. There are rainbow bridges carrying the sevenfold energies of the seven rays. So they must be sevenfold, from planet to planet, from system to system, from plane to plane on cosmic levels. Everything is connected by these septonates. So, all connected by septonates. It is over these bridges that the will of the related spiritual identities is projected. That's how you travel over a bridge. You travel through the projection of the will. So when we're doing our little Antikarana work and we, as it were, project this line of light or catapult ourselves into a higher world through the imagination, we are getting ready for this will travel across the big rainbow bridges, producing that synthesis of effort which is distinctive of the cooperative systemic life. In other words, our solar system is a group. And it's working pretty well together, which cooperates. And, you know, when you think about it, probably these planetary logoi have known each other when? You know, Maybe they were all members of the same family way back when, you know. Now they're on a higher turn of the spiral, also doing that group work together. There are definitely some people, though, with whom I don't want to be a member of the same solar system as they. I've told them so, you know. I won't be in your system, and they've said, I won't be in your system. And so we do understand each other. But then maybe in some super system we'll work it all out. The work of the masters in training from our planet, among other things, is to unfold within themselves not only sensitivity to systemic purpose, because in a way, every planetary god is a chakra within the solar logos, so we better know something about solar systemic purpose, but the ability to transmit that purpose to the council chamber at Shamballa. So these masters work as transmitters. These masters who are in training on our planet have to transmit to Shamballa. Transmit purpose, cosmic purpose, or systemic purpose to Shamballa. Yes, I better get that correct. Systemic. Doesn't want to do it. Okay. They have, in an extraplanetary sense, a definite correspondence with and relation to the group of Nirmanakayas, or divine contemplatives, within our planet, who work in contemplative activity with the Antakarana, which connects hierarchy with Shamballa and humanity with hierarchy. So it's a higher form of Nirmana Kaya ship. So they are linking and bridging and bringing the purpose into our center of purpose. It's a very responsible task. Now, a Nirmanakaya, what is the name of a Nirmanakaya? They are contemplatives. They're thinkers, and they are registrants. They are registrants of the purpose. That's what they're called. They are intermediaries. They are between two great centers, and they receive from one and transmit to another. And then, well, they're using mostly the intuition, and they are minimally of the 6th degree. So they're beyond our normal thinkers. There is between hierarchy and humanity, there's a correspondence. Between hierarchy and Shamballa are the Nirmanakayas we usually hear of. And now we're talking about Nirmanakayas who are between Shamballa and the sun. So these masters are training to get that kind of effort. What does DK tell us? Associated with hierarchy are two kinds of beings, registrants of the purpose and custodians of the plan. Purpose is higher than plan. So they receive, the custodians of the plan receive what has registered upon the intuitive consciousness of the Nirmanakayas, who send it to them. The amazing thing is that in all of hierarchy, up to the top, everybody's holding everybody else's hand. You know, the esoteric catechism, which way does it go? One hand above, one hand below. Everything is linked, and there's no break in that, in the chain of hierarchy. So it's not only you're being pulled up, but you're pulling up. And if you let go of one or the other, you're not doing your duty. Because here you're not trying and here you're not helping. If you let go here, you're not helping. If you let go here, you're not allowing yourself to get the wider vision and be helped. You're breaking the chain. That's in the Esoteric Catechism, the vision. As planetary logoi, when their own time comes, and I'll tell you what, that always staggers me because I have this reference, which I'm always losing. But basically, it says that many Maha Manvantaras ago, a planetary logos was like a master of wisdom is now. Many Maha Manvantaras ago. So how long does it take to become a planetary logos? A Maha Manvantara is a mere 311 trillion 40 billion years, according to HPB's chronology anyway. Let's multiply that by many and figure out how long it takes to become a planetary logos. Yes. Let's I'm just gonna take a quick little dip here. We'll see if anything comes up on that. No match, thank you. Let's see, I just try one more. I'll just be satisfied with Maha Manvantara. They always mean something else, They always, Well, we have something, but maybe not enough. Oh, we have certainly something, but maybe not really worth looking for. There is a certain there is a certain joy in finding a lost reference. Here's the statement that the Solar Logos is in his fifth Mahamanvantara. I have to, Planetary Logos, Okay. Man is repeating his endeavor up to the fifth initiation, which will bring him to a stage of consciousness achieved by a heavenly man in a much earlier Mahamanvantara. So much earlier. That's the many. That's the reference. Page 270, page 272. So time just expands here, and life is patient. How long does the universe actually last? We have the statement from scientists today that a universe lasts, someone was saying it's being corrected, about 15 or 18 billion years, something like that. On the basis of what DK said, I tried to make a calculation, and I ended up with a figure that had about 80 zeros, which is a lot more than a billion. In the old days, the word Google used to be esoteric. Only the real nerds knew about it. It was probably in that book something like Beyond the Google or 1, 2, 3 Infinity, whatever. A Google was one with 100 zeros after it. So it was a very high mathematical figure. But there was the still higher number. Have you ever heard of what's called the Googleplex? The Googleplex. It was one with a Google zeros after it. Not just 100, a Google zeros. And, so interesting to see these third-rate types take this mathematical term and turn it into a very profitable business. But, because originally it's a mathematical term indicating a huge number. Well, I don't know how I got there. But anyway, as planetary logoi, when their own time comes, these masters will be concerned with the registration of the purpose and expressed will of some solar logos. A hint therein lies. Not only of their solar logos necessarily, but of a newly generated solar logos, perhaps created out of present planetary logoi, who unify their consciousness to become a solar logos. And then these particular planetary logoi, who become so at that time, will have to express the will and purpose of that being. Sometimes I don't know whether beings come from above or from below. And sometimes I think they come from both at the same time. Do you ever wonder where you came from? I mean, the real you, you know? Whether, no, I don't think about that. And how long you've been around, and actually how meaningless it is to talk about time when you're talking about being. Well, you know, we've all been around forever. And when you stop to think about forever, that's one of those concepts that children love to think about. Forever and ever and ever and ever. It will destroy your mind if you think about forever for just one day. That's all it will take. But fortunately, most of us don't have the patience to think about it for more than 10 seconds. In olden days. In olden days. Yes, in olden days. In bygone days. In days gone by. All from the start. Okay. Well, I think that's true as far as it goes. But then you have to ask yourself that child's question, where'd the stars come from? And then, where'd that come from? Where'd that come from? Until you find out there's only one origin, and you're it. That's like hide and go seek, isn't it? You're it? Okay. So the whole idea of infinite duration of identity or of being is the foundation of everything we are and do. You know, you're meeting only yourself forever. Maybe a little boring, I don't know, but there's no one you don't know, and there's no one you are not. Now you know, those ideas are not accepted, but they're very ancient. And I suppose one day everybody wakes up to that and begins to think about the implications. There's no stranger, and I remember I was walking with my son, the philosopher. Okay, he's the real philosopher. I'm just a crazy mystic. Anyway, he's the philosopher, and I was saying, well, you know, Matt, in this system of unity, we are everything. There's nothing we are not. And we're walking along the road, and he looks at me, and he said, even the asphalt, which is the covering of the road. And I had to say, yeah, we're even the asphalt. But it struck me, you know, that you can interpret it so little because literally, because the idea of what a man is seems so remote from being something material or stellar or whatever. We have to expand our concept of identity. And what will that take? What will have to be broken down for us to achieve identification, which is exactly what's being worked on this kind of path and on the path of Earth service. So I'll have to get back to that asphalt bit a little later when I have a good answer. So registration of some planetary logos. They will then, through the planetary and systemic antikarana, supervise the gradual evolutionary impartation of that will which is now theirs to all the forms through which they function in a particular planet for which they have assumed responsibility. So one day, let us say, we will be a planetary logos, and our job will be to communicate the divine will of some solar logos to every little being which lives and moves and has its being in us. And even now, we have the analogy, don't we? In other words, we have a bunch of cells, don't we? A bunch of little lives. We're just filled with little lives. So what's the will that we are trying to communicate to them now? Could we call it the will of the soul? I mean, that would be good enough, wouldn't it? Even that. There's a higher being here. We're tuning in on its will, and if we succeed in conveying this will to all the little parts of ourselves, they are better off, aren't they? So we have the analogous job right now, don't we? This definitely involves, I like that, Sanat Kumara, or the Lord of the World, Planetary Logos, has assumed responsibility for us and is conveying to us the will of our solar logos. And we're learning slowly. But the laws of the soul are one good way to go, right? Because basically they are solar laws. So this definitely involves working with the soul aspect, relating to the second aspect, and with the unfoldment of conscious responsiveness and sensitive reaction to all higher impressions. So now you see why it's so important, this sensitivity of those who are on the planetary logoic path. You can see that DK is adding different things in this Rays and the Initiations presentation to what he said, which was much more kind of academic when he was talking in Cosmic Fire. So that's one of the things the masters do. These masters also, secondly, are the directing builders and creators, eventually, of all forms of planetary life. They build forms. Forms embodying qualities and intentions as yet undreamed of by us. But we can't even dream of what they would be. But he tells us there are always energies, qualities, intentions undreamed of by us. What does he call that? Not the rain cloud of knowable things, but it's like that. It's like the rain cloud of unknown things. Something like that. It's got unknown in it. They have developed in themselves a perfected synthesis of the two energies of Atma Buddhi, which is sometimes called the monad, or of spiritual will and spiritual love, completely unified and energetically active in a comprehensive condition seldom attained by any other group of masters in training. Okay, so these masters are Atma Buddhi. They are, in a way, Uranus, Neptune. Or we can say they are Vulcan, Venus. Okay. But, not only to receive and be sensitive to soul, but to actually shape forms. So that's a dual task, isn't it? One is in the realm of consciousness, the other is in the realm of creativity, isn't it? So they need both the second ray and the third ray, because the third ray will help them execute the building of the forms. Although technically speaking, the second ray is the ray of form, because it creates those magnetic conditions which hold matter together in a certain relationship which we call a form. So the second aspect is the form building aspect, but the activity which builds it belongs to the third aspect. Okay. It must be realized that the Buddhas of activity, of whom there are only 3 on our planet, are there more elsewhere? Are there more than 3 elsewhere? Are similarly active. They are active also in receiving the will of the solar logos. Remember, these are very high beings. They were monastic planetary logoi in the previous solar system, highly identified with intelligence. It seems that, once you get to that level, the only question that's in your mind is, how can I help you? Was there that book by Ram Dass, was it called Can I Help or something like that? It begins with a story of a struggling swimmer, and all of a sudden a dolphin comes out of nowhere and just kind of lifts him up to the top. So he's saved. It was the whole thing about service, So these Buddhas of activity, they are active love wisdom, or a complete synthesis of active intelligence, active love, and active will. So that's what they are. The three of them are all active, which means their major ray is ray 3, but their active activity, active love, active will. So they come from ray 3. The masters on this third path will, therefore, someday complete their training for planetary logoi by attaining the status of Buddha of activity. Now, it is said that the Buddhas of activity are operating under some particular law of sacrifice, which separates them somewhat from Sanat Kumara and makes them his subordinates. They have already been planetary logoi, and now they are coming in again as subsidiary planetary logoi. But let's just say that in this pyramid, which leads to the creation of a planetary logos, it looks like the Buddhas of activity are the last stop before you become the real thing. Maybe higher than chain lords, higher than globe lords, and so forth. There's a whole hierarchy here of beings you can possibly be on your way to becoming a full-fledged planetary logos. And it's my impression that planetary logoi get together to become a solar logos. This is like from the bottom up. There's also the top-down approach. So it all starts out with man becoming a solar angel. Can one man become a solar angel? Maybe. Do several men become a solar angel? I'm not sure. But anyway, a number of solar angels get together to become a planetary logos. And a number of planetary logoi, I think, get together to become a solar logos. And maybe it goes on like that. The solar logoi get together to become a cosmic logos, and on, until we have the one. The more powerful the entity, the more facets it has. The more facets yeah, until the one entity has everybody as a facet. Exactly. So this whole thing what we're trying to solve when we study occultism is the contrast between the one and the many, and the fact that the many are the one and the one are the many. And it's a difficult problem to solve. It's a philosophical, mathematical problem too. How can you be one and still be many? How can the part be the whole? How can the whole be the part? How can the finite be the infinite, and vice versa? Okay, so one day they will attain Buddhas of activity-ship. Now, this sometimes confuses me because those Buddhas of activity are Kumaras. Then you've got these esoteric Kumaras, invisible, 3 of them generally, 3 Buddhas of activity, and they rotate. So if they rotate, how can there only be 3? Because then what wasn't a Buddha of activity becomes an exoteric Kumara. Anyway, let's not trouble our head about it. The Kumaras are far away. But something's going on up there which is interesting. Maybe we only do have 3 Buddhas of activity, whether they are functioning exoterically or esoterically. Now, DK is very connected with Buddhas of activity. He's such a blend of the third ray and the second ray. And these are principally third-ray beings. And he sponsored this whole triangles work, which is based on the number 3, and it ends up at the feet of the Buddhas of activity. That's the essential esoteric basis of all the triangles work. Okay, so one day they will become the Buddhas of activity. Remember, Buddhas of activity are on their way to becoming planetary logoi. And, you know, as said about Master DK, although the idea has escaped me why I thought he would be, it seems a good path for him. Although the ray path, he's an expert. Yeah. Well, Master Kutumi, I believe there's a monadic ray difference between Master Kutumi and Master KH. I mean, Master DK. For Master Kutumi, I believe that like the Christ, he's a second ray monad and a second ray soul. I believe that Master DK, like the Buddha, is a third ray monad and a second ray soul. Master DK has a lot of ray 1, a lot. As far as Kutumi, I guess I could say I feel closer to DK than Kutumi. I'm less able to offer a suggestion on that question. But of course, all the masters have profound will. Whether Master Kutumi is expressing the first ray, I couldn't say. Certainly the fourth ray in certain respects. He's the master musician. Yes, he's there. He's lost his room. I guess if you put it like that, that would have been the thing to say. He's smiling over your shoulder, and from my point of view. Okay, so their training is attaining the status of Buddha of activity, and will for a period serve in that capacity in some planetary scheme before taking control and guidance of their own body of manifestation. So that's the hierarchy. That's the way it goes. And I think, you know, you work your way up. Globe Lords, Chain Lords, Ray Lords, Buddhas of activity, Planetary Logoi, probably with many different steps in between. It's all quite gradual. There are many stages, many steps, more than we'd like to even know about. But nobody jumps over the steps. Just like in initiation, you don't say, oh, you're precocious. I think you can skip a grade. You can go from initiation 1 to initiation 3, double promoted, you know, like they say. Everything's gradual. You have to go through everything, every step. Although the time equation may be in our hands, still we have to pass through. It's always a bit of a danger if you pass through too fast, because then you will have superficial progress. Yeah, oh, yes, don't worry. We may not read this thing about certain hierarchical changes. We're not there yet. Anyway, this is where he says there are now 9 paths and not 7. We will probably go on, and we will read wow, this is interesting. The frightful testing of the Great War, the hierarchy far earlier than had been hoped or anticipated has prepared itself for physical plane manifestation, or for what is called by them the process of externalization. So maybe Master Mori is right, you know. Maybe the worse the better is true. And on that note, you can take your break. And we will continue, at least we will finish this Planetary Logos thing, never to examine it again. And we will go on to the path to Sirius. Yes, and by the time everybody leaves, you won't be going home, you'll just... All right, we'll see you a little bit in 15 minutes or so. Wow, interesting stuff. Amazing. We have to really study this book, the rays and the initiations, not just the rules. There's so much more has to be correlated. So here we are to pick this up after our little break. Yeah, try to pick this up after the break. Okay. Okay. Stop recording. Cancel. Okay, webinarians, we'll be back with you before long. I'm just looking forward to the condition in which everybody in the United States shows their fortitude and stays up all night for these European seminars. They certainly couldn't be any the worse for it, don't you think? Anyway, happy to see you, Andrew and Brett and Carol from Australia and Karsten, I guess, from Denmark. Nice to see you. Elena, Slovakia, Gary Smith, I suppose the United States, not sure. Johanna from the Netherlands, and Nia from Finland, and Nicholas from across the Strand, Sweden, and Ron from Australia. Okay, we'll be back. We'll be back.